This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't some unfortunate, clumsy situation born of a poorly trained employee. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. A deliberate, conscious choice made by a manager at an upscale restaurant, a choice that communicated a message as clear as it was devastating, that a 9-year-old boy's clothes were perfectly acceptable on a white child, but unforgivably out of line on him. This is not merely a story about a simple dress code violation, a mundane administrative hurdle on the way to a family dinner. No, this is a story about how a dress code can be transformed into a weapon. It's a story about the quiet, insidious, and sneaky way that racism infects the most ordinary corners of everyday life, turning what should have been a cherished mother-son meal into a moment of profound and public shaming. Imagine the mental gymnastics required to try to explain to your 9-year-old son why he, specifically, is being turned away from a restaurant. He's excited for a special night out. He's hungry. He's holding the hand of his mom, the person who is supposed to be his guide and protector in the world. And suddenly there's a man, an authority figure, standing directly in his path, telling him that he doesn't belong. Now imagine, in that exact moment of confusion and hurt, looking right past the gatekeeper's shoulder and seeing another child, a white child, of about the same age, wearing an outfit that is, for all intents and purposes, indistinguishable from your son's. He is already sitting down. He is already eating. In that instant, the floor drops out. The so-called rules are not rules at all. They are a selective filter. The rules are not for everyone. The rules, it becomes painfully clear, are just for him. This is the dizzying, heart-sinking moment that Marcia Grant faced with her son, Dallas. And in that moment of acute injustice, she was confronted with her own choice. She could accept the humiliation, turn around and try to salvage the evening elsewhere, leaving the poison of the encounter to fester. Or she could do something else. She chose the latter. She reached into her purse, took out her phone, and hit record. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream or cause a scene. Instead, she held up a digital mirror to the ugliness unfolding right before her. With a voice that was shaking, not with rage, but with a potent mixture of disbelief and pure, unyielding resolve, she asked a simple question. It was a question that would detonate across the internet, ricocheting through social media feeds and news cycles, and ultimately force a multi-million-dollar restaurant empire to account for its actions. She asked, "Why?" The video begins, and its initial calmness is almost jarring. It's a stark contrast to the emotional storm brewing just beneath the surface. You see a young boy, Dallas, standing with a patience that belies his age. He's dressed in the quintessential uniform of a 9-year-old in modern America, an Air Jordan t-shirt, comfortable athletic shorts, and sneakers. He looks, in short, like a kid on a summer evening ready for a meal. His mother, Marcia Grant, is the one holding the camera, and her voice, when she speaks, is remarkably steady, yet firm with the clarity of her purpose. She is in a conversation with a manager at Ouzo Bay, a pricey and well-regarded Greek restaurant located in Baltimore's affluent Harbor East neighborhood. The manager, a white man in a neatly pressed button-down shirt, is explaining the restaurant's policy. "Unfortunately, we do have a dress code," he states, and the sterile corporate jargon immediately feels hollow and inadequate for the situation at hand. He makes a vague gesture toward Dallas's attire, as if the offense is self-evident. In response, Marcia's camera pans down, meticulously documenting her son's supposed crime for the world to see. The focal point is an Air Jordan logo, the iconic Jumpman silhouette. This symbol, representing a pinnacle of athletic achievement, a titan of black excellence, and a global emblem of cultural cool, is somehow being presented as grounds for refusal. Then comes the pivotal moment, the narrative turn that transforms the incident from a frustrating dispute into an undeniable exhibition of prejudice. Marcia masterfully pans her camera away from her son, slowly and deliberately, and zooms in on a table just a few feet away, in the restaurant's outdoor seating area. There, a young white boy is seated, comfortably enjoying his meal with his family. He, too, is wearing a graphic t-shirt and shorts. To any reasonable observer, the outfits are functionally, stylistically, and contextually the same. The only salient difference between the two boys is the color of their skin. But that white kid out there can eat here with his tennis shoes on and his athletic shirt, Marcia says. Her voice doesn't rise in volume, but the statement lands with the force of an accusation, cutting through the restaurant's ambient chatter. The manager, confronted with this visual evidence, begins to stammer. His composure cracks. He tries to deflect, to change the subject. "It's the shorts," he claims, attempting to find a new, more defensible line in the sand. But it's a futile effort. The camera's lens has already done its work, focusing again on the white child, who is also, unequivocally, wearing shorts. The truth has cornered the manager. He has nothing. He fumbles for words, his eyes darting away, and he repeats the phrase policy like a desperate mantra, as if the word itself possesses some magical power to erase the blatant hypocrisy of the moment. "I'll go get my manager," he says finally, an apparent attempt to escape a line of questioning he cannot possibly answer. But it is far too late. The damage is done. The truth has been captured in high definition, and the entire world is about to bear witness to it. This evening was not meant to be a battlefield. It was not a random, spontaneous decision to dine at Ouzo Bay. Marcia Grant had been to this restaurant before. She was familiar with its upscale atmosphere, its polished reputation, and yes, its stated dress code. This was meant to be a special occasion, an intentional gesture of love. She was taking her son Dallas out for a meal, just the two of them. It was supposed to be a memorable mother-son evening in their own home city of Baltimore, a moment of connection over good food. But upon their arrival, what should have been a simple, welcoming exchange, a friendly greeting, a quick table for two, morphed into an unexpected and deeply uncomfortable standoff at the front door. A manager emerged, and his eyes immediately flagged Dallas's outfit as a violation. The restaurant's dress code, as this manager attempted to articulate it, prohibited athletic wear. That very term, athletic wear, is a concept that demands closer inspection, a phrase so loaded with ambiguity that it practically invites biased interpretation. In the year 2020, in a world where fashion and sportswear are inextricably linked, how does one even begin to define that term in a way that isn't hopelessly entangled with cultural and racial biases? Dallas was wearing an Air Jordan t-shirt. Let's be unequivocally clear about what that means. The Jordan brand is not just athletic wear in the same category as a generic sweat-stained gym shirt. It is a global fashion behemoth, a premium high-end brand built upon the monumental legacy of a black icon, Michael Jordan. It represents excellence, aspiration, and a specific cultural currency. To view the Jumpman logo and see nothing more than a simple dress code violation demonstrates, at best, a profound lack of cultural awareness. In the worst-case scenario, it is a thinly veiled act of coded discrimination. His shorts were athletic in style. His shoes were sneakers. He was, in essence, a 9-year-old boy dressed in modern, popular, and entirely age-appropriate clothing. The manager's initial refusal is likely a scene that plays out countless times, in myriad doorways, and never gets recorded. A person of color is told they do not meet some vague, subjective standard. They feel the sharp, familiar sting of discrimination. They are forced to retreat, to walk away carrying the heavy burden of that humiliation home with them, the injustice swallowed and silenced. But Marcia Grant was not going to let that happen. Not this time. The sight of that other child, the white child dining peacefully, was the catalyst. It transformed what might have been dismissed as a misunderstanding into a clear, irrefutable act of prejudice. And if you watch the manager's body language and his verbal fumbling in the video, his entire performance of authority completely disintegrates. When Marcia calmly and methodically points out the white child, he is caught in the act. His confidence evaporates. His first instinct is to grasp at straws, to try and invent a distinction where none exists. He insists that the other boy's t-shirt is somehow not athletic. How does he arrive at this conclusion? He doesn't say, "There's no objective metric offered." It is purely a gut feeling, a subjective judgment call. And that is the very heart of the problem. The policy is not a fixed rule. It is a flexible tool, and he is wielding it based on his own ingrained biases. Whether conscious or not, when Marcia presses him on this flimsy justification, he abandons the argument about the shirt and pivots to the shorts. "It's only his shorts," the manager says, a note of desperation creeping into his voice as he scrambles to find some semblance of logical footing. But Marcia's camera has already served as the ultimate fact-checker, having clearly shown that the white child is also wearing shorts. The manager is rendered speechless. He is a man armed with a rule book, facing living, breathing proof that the rules are not being applied fairly. His last pathetic recourse is to offer to get his manager, as if another higher layer of management could somehow sanitize the blatant discrimination that was taking place. And throughout this entire humiliating ordeal, Dallas stands there, a 9-year-old boy. He is the silent subject of debate in this whole. His clothes, his body, and his very presence are being scrutinized and questioned. He hears his mother's strong, steady voice fighting for him, and he sees a man in a position of authority telling him no. Marcia would later describe the look on her son's face. The precise moment he fully understood that he was being treated differently because of who he is. That is the real lasting damage here. It is a lesson that no child should ever have to learn, especially not at the doorway of a restaurant where he was promised a special dinner. He is learning, in real time, that rules can be bent for some people and used as a rigid weapon against others. He is learning that in America, in his home city of Baltimore in the year 2025, the same clothes on two different boys can mean two entirely different things. Marcia and Dallas left. They did not get to eat at Uzo Bay that night. But before they walked away, Marcia Grant secured the evidence. That short, shaky, but devastatingly clear video was about to accomplish what a quiet, internal complaint never could. It would hold a mirror up to the entire Atlas restaurant group and force them to take a long, hard look at the reflection staring back at them. We are exhausted with this, so deeply and profoundly tired. Tired of having to witness a child's outfit become the subject of a public debate. Tired of having to explain, yet again, why these situations are not innocent mistakes. We are tired of seeing these videos surface with sickening regularity, each one feeling like a postcard from the front lines of everyday racism, a grim reminder of a battle that is far from over. What you witnessed in that video is a perfect textbook example of how vague, subjective policies become the ideal instruments for discrimination. A dress code that is not applied equally and universally to everyone is not a dress code. It is a pretext. It is an excuse. In one corner, you have Marcia Grant, a real estate professional who, in that singular moment, was forced to become a warrior for her son's fundamental dignity. In the center, you have 9-year-old Dallas, a little boy who wanted to have dinner with his mom and instead received a painful, public, and unforgettable lesson in bias. And in the other corner, you have Uzo Bay, which is not an isolated entity but a cog in a much larger, more powerful machine, the Atlas Restaurant Group. This is a formidable player in Baltimore's hospitality scene. This corporate giant owns and operates over a dozen high-end exclusive establishments. This wasn't some small, family-owned diner making a clumsy, uninformed error in judgment. This was a sophisticated corporation with written policies, human resources departments, and professionally trained managers. They absolutely should have known better. The manager's athletic wear excuse is a classic for a particular reason. It is beautifully, tragically vague. Its ambiguity is its most powerful feature. It grants the person at the door, the host, the bouncer, or in this case, the manager, an enormous amount of discretionary power. They become the sole arbiter of taste and acceptability. What one person might see as a high-end, culturally relevant fashion statement, like an Air Jordan shirt, another can easily dismiss as gym clothes. This vagueness is not an accidental flaw in the policy. It is the entire point. It provides a built-in shield of plausible deniability. The unwritten underlying rule becomes, we don't discriminate against people. We only discriminate against their clothes. But when that rule is mysteriously and consistently applied to reject people of color, you are forced to ask the critical question, what is the rule really for? It's about policing blackness. It's about a deeply rooted discomfort with styles, brands, and aesthetics that are prominently tied to black culture. And this is anything but new. For decades, dress codes have been systematically used as a social gatekeeping mechanism to exclude specific populations from specific spaces. Seemingly neutral rules against baggy jeans, Timberland boots, sideways baseball caps, or athletic jerseys have been standard fixtures in upscale bars, nightclubs, and restaurants across the country. The policies rarely, if ever, explicitly mention race. They don't need to. They target the visual identifiers of a particular culture to exclude the people of that culture. Viewed in that context, Marsha Grant's decision to record the entire interaction was a strategic act of genius. Her calmness was her superpower. She instinctively understood that by remaining composed, she was refusing to play into the toxic, angry black woman stereotype. This racist trope is so often deployed to dismiss the valid complaints and righteous anger of black women. She wasn't an aggressor. She was a reporter. She was a documentarian. She was, in effect, a lawyer presenting her case in the court of public opinion. Her method was simple but devastatingly effective. She just laid out the facts. Here is my son, here is his outfit, and over there is a white child in virtually the same outfit. Explain the discrepancy. The manager couldn't. And that fumbling, stammering, guilty silence was the entire story. Once Marsha Grant uploaded that video to her social media, it was like striking a match in a room full of gasoline. The clip didn't just spread, it detonated. It went viral in the truest sense of the word, moving with an astonishing velocity across the digital landscape. It was shared by celebrities with massive platforms, by civil rights activists, by journalists, and, most importantly, by millions of ordinary people who watched the clip and saw a perfect, infuriatingly clear example of modern racism in action. The internet swiftly became a global jury, and its verdict was fast, unanimous, and absolutely brutal for the restaurant. The comment sections on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and every platform where the video appeared erupted in a torrent of collective outrage. People were utterly disgusted, and they did not mince words. "This is horrifying and heartbreaking," one user wrote. "In 2020? To a child. Shame on them. I will never eat there." Another commented, "That manager needs to be fired immediately. I'm never spending a single penny at Ouzo Bay or any other Atlas restaurant again." The message was resounding and crystal clear. This was not a situation open to ambiguous interpretation. This was textbook racial discrimination, made all the more monstrous because its target was a child. This massive and unrelenting backlash put immediate and immense pressure on the Atlas Restaurant Group. And it's crucial to remember, this wasn't just about Ouzo Bay. Atlas is a restaurant empire, a network of some of Baltimore's best-known and most expensive dining spots, including places like Tagliata, the Chop Tank, and Azumi. Their entire brand identity is carefully constructed around notions of sophistication, luxury, and exclusivity. Almost overnight, that meticulously crafted brand became toxic. The name Ouzo Bay transformed from a symbol of fine dining into a hashtag synonymous with bigotry. Soon, the digital outrage spilled into the physical world. Protesters began to gather outside the restaurant, holding signs and chanting. Local Baltimore news outlets quickly picked up the story, and it gained national attention from there. CBS News, The Washington Post, TMZ, and Good Morning America all ran segments on the incident. Marsha Grant and her son Dallas were no longer just a mother and son who had been denied a meal. They had become the human faces of a vital and painful national conversation about race and prejudice. Facing a full-blown public relations nightmare of catastrophic proportions, the Atlas Restaurant Group scrambled to perform damage control. Their first public move was to issue a formal statement. It began with carefully chosen words. "Today, we learned of an alarming incident that occurred over the weekend at one of our restaurants in Baltimore, MD, Ouzo Bay. Incredibly disturbing. Sickened." These are strong, emotive words, right? They are specifically engineered to mirror the public's own anger and shock. The statement continued, admitting to the basic facts presented in the video, confirming that Dallas, a young African-American person, was indeed denied service, while a Caucasian youth, dressed similarly, was allowed to dine. They announced that the primary manager seen in the video had been placed on indefinite leave. They offered a direct apology. "We sincerely apologize to Marsha Grant, her son, and everyone impacted by this painful incident." On the surface, it was a reasonable first step. But the phrase, "indefinite leave," immediately raised red flags for a skeptical public. What does that even mean? To many, it sounded suspiciously weak, like a temporary slap on the wrist rather than a genuine consequence. It's not a firing. It's a way to remove the offending employee from public view until the media storm subsides, with the potential to reinstate them later quietly. Furthermore, the apology only materialized after the video had gone viral and their business was taking a massive financial and reputational hit. This timing led many to ask the cynical but necessary question. Was the company truly sickened by the racism that occurred, or were they just sickened that they got caught on camera? Was this an expression of genuine regret and a commitment to change, or was it simply crisis-driven brand management? The public, by and large, wasn't buying it. The pressure remained relentless. People wanted more than just carefully worded statements. They wanted real, structural change. That first apology was nowhere near enough to extinguish the fire that Marsha Grant's video had started. Before we get to what happened next in this unfolding drama, take a moment to think about this. The only reason we are even having this conversation, the only reason a multi-million-dollar corporation was forced to respond at all, is because one woman had the presence of mind and the bravery to pull out her phone and record the truth. It serves as a powerful reminder of the agency we all have to demand accountability in the face of injustice. If you believe this kind of story needs to be told, and you want to support content that digs deep into these critical issues, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. I would really love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Marsha Grant's shoes? Now let's get into the aftermath and the complex question of accountability. That first tentative response from the Atlas Restaurant Group, placing one manager on indefinite leave, did not land well. The public overwhelmingly saw it as a transparently weak half measure, an attempt to placate the masses without enacting any meaningful consequences. The digital outrage continued to escalate and the pressure on the company intensified. It became glaringly apparent to the executives at Atlas that this was not a media storm they could wait out. This required a more decisive action. Just a day or two later, as the story dominated news cycles, their public stance evolved. The company issued a second, much stronger statement. This time, the consequences were tangible and unambiguous. The Atlas Restaurant Group announced that, following a swift internal review, 2 managers who were involved in the incident are no longer with the company. They employed careful corporate speak, stating the individuals had been separated from the organization. Still, the message was unmistakable. The men responsible for turning Dallas Grant away were out of a job. This was a significant step, and it happened as a direct result of sustained public demand for real accountability. But they didn't stop there. Under immense pressure, they also announced a significant change to their company-wide policy. Effective immediately, their controversial dress code would no longer be applied to children 12 years old and under. This was a direct and explicit response to what had happened to Dallas, a concrete measure designed to ensure that this specific type of incident couldn't happen to another child in one of their establishments. To cap it all off, Atlas CEO Alex Smith released his own personal video apology, calling the incident a teachable moment for the entire organization and promising that the company would do better, including implementing enhanced diversity and inclusion training for all its staff. So, was this a victory? On the one hand, yes, it certainly did look like one. A mother and her son were subjected to an apparent injustice. She recorded it. The public amplified her voice into a roar, and a powerful corporation responded with firings and a substantive policy change. In the fast-paced world of social media justice, that sequence of events constitutes a clear win. It demonstrates that a single person armed with a smartphone can, under the right circumstances, hold a powerful company accountable for its actions. However, if you look a little closer, scrutinize the details, the picture becomes far more complicated. Was this an act of genuine accountability, or was it a series of shrewd business moves designed to salvage a damaged brand? The policy change, for instance, is surgically precise. It effectively solves the specific PR problem that went viral, that of a child being racially profiled, by simply exempting all young children from the dress code. But what about the root of the problem? The dress code itself, the very one that bans athletic wear and was used as the weapon of discrimination against Dallas, remained firmly in place for adults. The same tool that was used to discriminate against a 9-year-old black boy could still be used, just as arbitrarily, against a 19-year-old black man or a 25-year-old black woman. They put a Band-Aid on the symptom that went viral, rather than curing the underlying disease. Even more telling, the company's narrative took another dramatic turn later on. In response to a lawsuit filed by Marcia Grant against them, the Atlas Group's story shifted dramatically. Their lawyers began to argue that the entire incident had nothing to do with race at all. They claimed that the two boys' outfits were, in fact, materially different. They argued that the white boy was wearing J.Crew khaki-type shorts, not athletic shorts, and therefore did not violate the dress code. They even released carefully selected security camera footage showing other black patrons being served in the restaurant that day, essentially employing the corporate version of the hollow "I have black friends" defense. This legal maneuvering makes their initial, sickened public apology look profoundly hollow. It strongly suggests that their public expression of regret was more about protecting their bottom line and staving off a boycott than it was about any genuine moral or ethical reckoning with racism within their corporate culture. Yes, managers were fired and a specific policy was changed. However, the incident also provides us with a fascinating, if disheartening, glimpse into the modern corporate crisis playbook. Apologize with convincing emotion when caught. Make a few highly targeted changes to appease the public. But never, ever admit that the problem might be systemic or that the discrimination was intentional. To truly understand the weight and significance of what happened to Dallas Grant, you have to recognize that this was not merely a one-off, isolated incident. This moment, captured on a smartphone, is a single, perfect, and painful example of a much larger and uglier picture of discrimination in America. It is a part of a long, sad, and deeply ingrained history of using supposedly neutral rules and policies to maintain a racial hierarchy and control social spaces. Dress codes, in particular, have long served as a convenient and effective tool for exclusion. After the Civil Rights Act of 1964 made explicit whites-only signs illegal, some establishments and institutions sought out sneakier, more subtle ways to control who was welcome within their walls. Dress codes proved to be the perfect vehicle. By banning styles that were culturally associated with Black and Latino youth, such as athletic jerseys, baggy clothing, specific brands of boots, or non-traditional headwear, they could effectively deny entry to people of color without ever having to say the word race. It is discrimination cloaked in the language of standards and decorum, providing the user with plausible deniability. We're not racist. We just have standards of attire. What's especially telling in this case is that this wasn't even the Atlas Restaurant Group's first public controversy surrounding its dress code. Just 1 year before the Ouzo Bay incident, another one of their prominent Baltimore restaurants, the Chop Tank was blasted for implementing a dress code that banned excessively baggy clothing, brimless headwear, and jerseys. Critics immediately and forcefully pointed out that the language seemed clearly and deliberately aimed at excluding black customers. Following a significant public outcry, the company was compelled to revise its policy. So, when the incident with Dallas occurred a year later, it could not be framed as an innocent or unforeseen mistake. It is part of an established pattern of behavior for this specific company. Following the viral video of Dallas, former employees even came forward, speaking to media outlets about what they described as a pervasive culture of racism and sexism within the Atlas organization. This story is a powerful and poignant example of the phenomenon known as living while black, the exhausting and dispiriting reality that for African Americans, the most normal, mundane, everyday activities can suddenly and unpredictably turn into moments of suspicion, humiliation, or even mortal danger. We saw it with the 2 black men who were arrested at a Starbucks in Philadelphia for the simple act of waiting for a friend to arrive before ordering. We saw it with the white woman who called the police on an 8-year-old black girl for selling bottles of water on a hot day. And we saw it with Amy Cooper in Central Park, who infamously called the police on a black bird watcher, Christian Cooper, after he had asked her to follow the park's rules and leash her dog. What happened to Dallas Grant belongs in that same sad, infuriating collection of stories. In each case, a black person is simply trying to exist in a public space, waiting for a friend, selling water, watching birds, going to dinner, and a white person, whether an employee or a self-appointed enforcer of social norms, uses a policy, a rule, or a call to the police as a weapon to put them back in their perceived place. The psychological damage that an experience like this inflicts upon a 9-year-old child is impossible to measure fully. On that evening, Dallas was taught a devastating and formative lesson, that his body, his choices, and his very presence are judged by a different and harsher set of rules than those applied to his white peers. He learned that he could be deemed inappropriate or unacceptable at any given moment, for reasons that make no logical sense. This isn't just embarrassing in the moment. It is traumatic. It fundamentally shapes how a child sees the world and, more importantly, his place within it. Marcia Grant expressed the parental anguish of this perfectly in her post. It's hard AF when you have to see your child upset because he knows he's being treated differently than a white child. Ultimately, the lawsuit filed by Marcia Grant against the Atlas Restaurant Group was dismissed in early 2024. A federal judge ruled that there was not enough evidence to meet the high legal bar of proving intentional racial discrimination, siding with the restaurant's legal argument that their dress code was posted and that the white child's shorts were technically khaki and thus compliant. While the case is legally closed, the court of public opinion reached its own, very different verdict long ago. The judge's ruling highlights the incredible difficulty of proving discrimination in a court of law, where intent is often a key factor. But the video tells a more fundamental truth that no legal ruling can erase. We saw what we saw, and no amount of legalistic arguing about the material difference between khaki shorts and basketball shorts can change the fundamental, gut-wrenching injustice of that moment. So, after all the outrage, the apologies, the firings, and the legal battles, what are we left with? We are left with the indelible image of a mother, her son, and a smartphone. We are left with a story that perfectly encapsulates the frustrating, exhausting, and often maddening reality of systemic racism in the 21st century. It is a story of how a seemingly innocuous rule like a dress code can be wielded as a weapon, and how a special family dinner can be twisted into a public display of prejudice. The Atlas Restaurant Group did what large corporations often do when faced with a crisis of their own making. They apologized profusely, fired the low-level employees who became the public face of the problem, and tweaked a single policy to address their immediate PR issue. For them, it was ultimately a teachable moment, a business crisis to be managed and contained. But for Marcia and Dallas Grant, it wasn't a teachable moment. It was life. It was a painful, personal reminder of the persistent and heartbreaking truth that the world is not yet equal. A world where a 9-year-old boy's clothing is judged not on its own merit, but by the color of the skin of the person wearing it. The real, enduring lesson here is a story about power. It's about the power of a manager to interpret a rule through the distorted lens of his own bias. It's about the power of a corporation to write policies that, intentionally or not, have discriminatory effects. But it is also a story about a different and perhaps more hopeful kind of power. The formidable power of a mother's love and her refusal to let an injustice stand. The collective power of a community, both online and in the streets, to rise and demand accountability. And, undeniably, the immense power of hitting the record button. Without that video, this incident would have been another painful private memory for a mother and son to carry alone. Because she recorded it, the conversation became a global one. It forced a reckoning, no matter how messy or incomplete that reckoning may be. And so, we must end with the one question that hangs over this entire affair. It is the question the manager at the door could not answer. The question the corporation's lawyers tried to sidestep, and the one our society is still struggling with every single day. What does it honestly say about our world, about our progress, and about our values, when a 9-year-old's outfit is policed differently based on the color of his skin? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think needs to change to stop this from happening again? And if you believe these stories and these conversations matter, make sure you subscribe and share this video. Thanks for watching.